Hello everyone,
Hello.
we are back with another analysis video for Mindbug. Took quite some time, but now we are here. We have the new rotation now with the brand new set, Battlefruits, which is quite exciting because it's a lot of new cards and new combinations that we can learn from. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. This is a game that I played this morning.
All right. Yeah, I think the new set has been quite fun so far. Let's see what this game has to offer. First of all, we can take a look at the cards that are not available, and I think there are some interesting things to note because the Carrot Cleric is 2 times out, so a very big, powerful creature is out, meaning that creatures that have a high base power could maybe be a bit stronger with this creature being out, and also one sneaky and the Dragon Fruit. All right, and you start the game and have already an interesting starting hand with some creatures that are maybe rather nice to play in late game, like the Broccoli Bards or Spinakia. So those you probably don't want to play. Just playing them as a poisonous creature wouldn't really be that great. The Pomilocillo, I think, would be too dangerous to play. I think it's generally a dangerous creature to play just without any knowledge at the beginning of the game. But now it is even the strongest creature in your hand, and also those two Carrot Clerics out. So at the end, I think it's a decision between Mangonade and Alluring Oyster here. With the Mangonite maybe being a bit more of a dangerous play, as there is not a really clear answer to it in case it gets mind-bugged. In my experience, it does happen sometimes that it just won't be mind-bugged at the beginning of the game, as there are some ways to play around it. Maybe players want to keep their mind-bug rather. So I would be a little bit inclined to play it here. But it could also backfire, and so I do think the Oysters may be a bit of a safer pick. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think the same actually. The two poisonous creatures are not worth playing now because we can't use their on-play effect efficiently, and the Pomolocilla is just way too dangerous. Even though we don't have hunters on our side, it's still very dangerous if we give our opponent the Pomolocilla because he can just enable all his hunters, and he knows if he places hunters and we take them, we can't use them. And hunters are always, I like to mind bug hunters a lot. They are always very important for the game state. And so it's basically about Mangonade or Oyster. And I also took the Oyster because the Mangonade also can really backfire on us here if he decides to take it.
Right, so you will go with the Oyster, and yeah, maybe also a card that the opponent can play around, but you have the Pomilocilla in hand, meaning you have the option to maybe just play that creature. Either it gets mind-bugged and you have the chance to maybe take it with the Oyster, or if not, then you have the Pomilocilla on board. So with that, I do think the Oyster also is a strong opening in that regard, as it maybe has a nice follow-up. Right, opponent plays the Cherry Bugs here, which is, I think, a nice answer to the Oyster, because it's a creature that the Oyster can't take control of, but also a creature that stops the Oyster, because with the Oyster, sometimes the problem, either you have a stronger card, then you can't really play it because it will be taken away, but if you play a weaker card, then the Oyster can maybe just attack, and but the Cherry Bug stops that very efficiently.
Basically, it takes all the pressure away with that play.
Yeah. Nonetheless, I think I wouldn't mind back the Cherry Bug here. It is a nice answer. The Cherry Bug generally is, of course, a nice creature to have, but I think there are some ways to play around it in the hand. The Mangonade maybe at some point can be played. There's the Duradillo, which I think is also a nice answer to the Cherry Bug, because if you attack the Cherry Bug with it when it was already defeated once, then it can defeat the Cherry Bug while getting defeated itself, meaning that the Cherry Bug won't steal anything. And with that, there are some answers, and maybe it's better to save the mind bug for some other things.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, so with no mind bug. And then it's, of course, the question what to play.
yeah, I decided for the Pomelozilla because I really want my oyster to harvest efficiently, and that's only the case if I get a big creature on the opponent's board. And the Pomelozilla is really a creature that's very, very dangerous. So it's quite likely that he takes it, and if he doesn't take it, I'm very happy about it anyways.
Yeah, I think with the oyster, that's just very nice. Basically, guaranteeing to get something nice out of the oyster, because without the oyster, it would be too dangerous to play the Pomelozilla. So even if it doesn't get Mindbug, and the opponent maybe doesn't play a creature that can be taken by the oyster still did some nice, gave some nice value with even allowing to play the Pomelozilla. Then you draw the Pepperwing. The opponent decides to attack, which I think is probably a mistake. But this maybe also is followed up with another mistake here. Because what would be best here, I think, is to block with the Pomelozilla, then the Pomelozilla gets to the board of the opponent, but it can immediately be taken back, meaning it's just the Cherrybug got eliminated and the board stays the same. But I think that was something that you missed in the situation.
Yes, it was just something I didn't thought about in this situation. I don't know why, but that was definitely a misplay.
Yeah, so here it could have been a very nice opportunity to eliminate the Cherrybug, stay on 3 lives. So not ideal, of course, in the beginning, but something that can maybe be overlooked. So in this situation, sadly, the oyster won't have any creature to take. The Cherrybug is still on board, and now the question is how to follow up. And I think there are some potentially interesting options. With the oyster's effect now being triggered, there is the possibility of playing a card like Spinakia and maybe getting the counters back on the oyster. Maybe there's the option to play the Duradillo with the Pomelozilla now being on board, and with the Duradillo also being a nice answer to the Cherrybug. And there's also the option maybe just play a card like Pepperwing.
Yes, I think I decided in this case for the Pepperwing just because it's quite a safe play. Nothing really bad can happen if I use the Pepperwing now, and if the board stays nearly the same, then now I have the option to attack with the Pepperwing, because I think it's quite good for me if the Cherrybug gets traded with the Pepperwing, because the Pepperwing is not that strong in this rotation. I feel like it's oftentimes just way too slow.
Yeah. There could have been maybe a thought about just attacking with the oyster now to maybe remove the Cherrybug and the opponent just getting oyster. But with Spinakia in hand, the oyster has some potential for later on.
Yeah.
And with that, I think that is not a good idea. And Pepperwing, I agree, is a relatively safe play. Maybe it could have been an idea to try to get the Duradillo on board. But at the moment, you're also already on 2 lives. Maybe it's a bit dangerous and can still serve as a nice blocker for the opponents.
Yeah.
Just a relatively safe play here, going with the Pepperwing.
You can see I think about playing the Spinakia now, but like I said before, I really want the harvest effect from my oyster to get used. And if I use the Spinakia now, he maybe can play around it.
Yeah, so better to maybe save it for later when there are actually some creatures that can be taken by the oyster.
Yes.
Here the Cherrybug actually attacks again, and yeah, I think going down to 1 life is not really an option, especially with the Duradillo in the hand that maybe would be nice to use later on. And I do think the card that maybe can just be lost the easiest here and given to the opponent should be the Pepperwing.
Yeah.
Pomelozilla is too strong, and oyster with the Spinakia I also would value more highly here.
Yeah, and it also gives my opponent a 6-power creature that I maybe can gain control of with my oyster later.
Yeah. Right, so you block with the Pepperwing. And then it's already your turn again. And I think again there are some options that could be played. I think with the Pomelozilla on board, playing Duradillo is always maybe an option at least.
Yeah.
That can be considered. Just attacking with the Pomelozilla could be considered, even though with the opponent being on 3 life and Pepperwing being a tough creature, I think that's maybe a bit too slow. And if the goal is to make a bit of pressure here, I do think the better choice would maybe be the Lich King, as it is a frenzy creature, very strong creature. The 2 carrot clerics are out, and in addition, it also has the life loss implemented with the harvest ability. So I do think if the goal is to do some pressure, the Lich King could be a nice play, and I do think generally it could be a nice play here. Also a bit dangerous, as if it is taken away, you go down to 1 life, you still have the Duradillo on board, but still, I think.
But all in all, even though it's quite a little bit risky right now because of the life loss and the Duradillo in my hand, I'm usually quite happy if my opponent takes control of something like Lich King with a Mindbug, because I think it's also a creature that is not as valuable as most of the other creatures in the set.
Yeah, and if the Lich King is taken away, that also means that maybe the Oyster, if it is reactivated with Spinakia, has again a better target than maybe the Pepperwing,
Yeah.
even though it won't be quick enough to also gain the harvest effect, but still for the 8 power frenzy, it could still be nice. So I do think the Lich King is a fine play here. Duradillo may be also something that could be played, but also could serve as a very strong blocker, and knows that maybe the opponent has a way at some point to remove the Pomeluzilla. And the Lich King just does a little bit of pressure, and the opponent has to find an answer to it. Or Mind Bucket, that's of course also an answer, and then the question is again what to do now. And here's maybe the option. There are 2 nice ways to deal with the Lich King, I think. Either maybe the Duradillo could be played, and then it can just be eliminated immediately, even before the life loss effect triggers. Or there's maybe the option to reactivate the Oyster and then take control of the Lich King later. The Spinakia is nicely a poisonous creature, so can block the Lich King in case the opponent should decide to attack with it. And so that could be an option. Sadly, the Oyster trigger will be happening after the Lich King trigger, which I do think is relevant in this situation. Letting the Lich King harvest effect trigger means you are on 1 life, and then it gets really tricky to play the Duradillo, which is why I think I would probably go with the Duradillo here. If the opponent uses the second Mindbug on a card that they can't use, at least at the moment, for themselves, I think that would be fine. And if you get it, then you can just remove the Lich King, prevent a life loss, and with that be a bit safer with the Duradillo.
I definitely see the point here, and I think that's also quite a good play. But I went for the Spinacia, I think, just because I still have 1 more turn to kill the Lich King with my Duradillo. I can still do this next turn in theory. And of course, the Spinacia gives me a lot of value now, and it doesn't give the opponent any value at all, except of a free power poisonous. And so that's why I played the Spinacia now, just so it's a really bad Mindbug target for the opponent and gives me quite some value.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. That for now, the opponent can't really get anything out of Spinakia, while it could be different later on. And there's also 1 more turn to maybe play the Duradillo and remove the Lich King.
Yeah.
So you go with the Spinakia play, and we'll get the Oyster back into play with some new counters. You draw the Captain Crocodile, which, considering your life situation, could be quite a relief if you get him out.
Yeah, was quite happy about that.
Right, so you will get the Oyster back into play.
Of course, immediately play it again. There's no question about that, I think.
And there's the second cherry bug from the opponent, and again the question is whether to Mindbug it or not. You still have 2 Mindbugs. It's a card that is most of the times quite valuable, so I think it is a fair play to Mindbug it. But maybe I still would tend towards not Mindbugging it, as you still have the Duradillo. Maybe you can play it at the next turn, remove the Lich King afterwards, the cherry bugs. If it is taken away, you have something like Mango Nate, which can kill the cherry bug without getting taken to the opponent. And with that, I do think there are some ways to play around it. But with 2 Mindbugs left, I think it's also a fine play to just Mindbug it and have a very useful creature on the own board.
Yeah, I think in this situation I did mind bug it, but in the retrospective, I probably wouldn't do it again, um, because it's not really necessary. It's nice to have on board. Definitely, it's not a very bad play or a punt in any ways, but I still have the Mangonite and the Duradillo who can get rid of it without getting the defeated effect of the Cherry Bug. And my opponent only has one Mind Bug, and he also can't really use it very effectively in offense because I still have the Spinacia, which I would give to him if he attacks with the Cherry Bug, which I would be happy about. So maybe it was a little bit of a misplay from me here.
Yeah, so the Cherry Bug gets mind bugged. Still a useful creature to have. Maybe it takes some option away from the opponent to do some pressure, which also can be relevant with you being on low life. And the opponent has the chance to play another card. And it's the Fearberry, and that is also quite a tough decision. Maybe showcasing that not made big mind bugging the Cherry Bug would have been potentially better, because now I do think there are two options that both look a little bit dangerous. Because the Fearberry, maybe a creature that sometimes isn't that strong in this situation, could be quite threatening, because if you don't have a chance to remove it, and with the Leech King maybe triggering soon, there's the chance that it will just kill you as soon as the two harvest counters are gone, and you have to find an answer to it very quickly. And one answer that you of course nicely have in hand is the Duradillo, but of course the opponent could definitely be very inclined to use the second Mind Bug, and after that there is not really a way that would be quick enough. Mangonate isn't quick enough, and the Captain Crocodile with gaining the life could maybe release a little bit of pressure. But it would be a bit of a risky situation having the Fear Barrier on board. That being said, with the opponent still having 7 cards in total, going now down to 0 mind bugs with a dangerous life situation. If the Duradillo, or you will soon go down to 1 life very likely. So yeah, that I think is even more dangerous, and I think it's probably correct to not mind bug it here.
Yeah, that was also my thought here. It's just I can't really give my opponent 7 cards in deck that he can just freely play, because I still have some answers here, but they are not very clean answers, but they are answers for this situation.
No, but yeah, the Fear Berry in combination with the Leech King life loss, and then also maybe a Duradillo that still wants to get on board, is not quite a potentially dangerous situation. So let's see. Not mind bug it. Now the question is, which is the best card to respond?
So I went for the Captain Crocodile because I think there's only really 2 options. I think it's the Duradillo or the Captain. Or do you see another viable option?
No.
No. So these are the 2 viable options here. If I play the Duradillo and my opponent mind bugs, I think it's very risky to do that, because the Duradillo is really my cleanest answer to the Fearberry situation. The Captain Crocodile is maybe forces my opponent to mind bug it, because he sees the situation where I go down to 1 life and he has the Fearberry still on board. So maybe he mind bugs it, and then I can just follow up with the Duradillo, which would be very nice. And if he lets me keep it, I'm also not that unhappy, because yes, in his turn he deals 1 damage to me, but as soon as it's my turn again, I go back up to 3 life. And I also take the Lychee King with my Alluring Oyster. So I have the 2 8 power frenzies on board, which is quite threatening at the moment. Because if you remember, at the start of the game, both of the carrots went out of the deck, so he can't counter it with that. So there's not that many counters left. because we already saw both cherry bugs and both carrots are gone. So the only really clean answer for the 8 power frenzies that are not involving any traits is the Tomageddon. So that's why I went for the captain here.
Yeah, I do think it makes sense. First, I thought that maybe it could be nice to play the Duradillo and the opponent might let it through because you're in relatively low life, and if it is played after the Captain Crocodile, then maybe it is more likely to get Mindbug, but I missed a little bit on how better the situation is if the Captain Crocodile doesn't get Mindbug. You're on 3 life. As you said, you have the 2 8 frenzy creatures. The opponent has no frenzy creature to combine with the Fearberry. The Pepper Ring is still a bit annoying, but I do think the situation is good enough that hopefully it can work nicely. And so I think the Captain Crocodile here is a good play. And there's a chance that it will get mind-bugged, which then gives the opportunity to get rid of some of the threats on board with the Duradillo, which is also still somewhat dangerous with being low in life, but I think some risks have to be taken here. So the opponent indeed mind-bugs the Captain Crocodile, and I do think here's a relatively clear way on how to proceed. The Fearberry has to go, has to be defeated. For that, the Duradillo has to be played. However, if the Duradillo now defeats the Fearberry, then the Leech King effect triggers, going down to 1 life with an already damaged Duradillo would be an extremely dangerous situation. So now I do think it's best to first take the Leech King out with the Duradillo, and then you have the chance to, at a turn after, take the Fearberry out, and you then are still in 1 life. The Duradillo is gone, but you're not in immediate threat of losing because of a defeated effect.
Yeah, that's exactly what my thoughts were in this game. I think I also just played the Duradillo now and take the Leech King first.
No. It's quite important to prevent a life loss from the Leech King, that the Duradillo can die while you still being alive. And so let's see, you will go for the play. Then opponent can't really attack that nicely, maybe to activate Pepper Wing, but there's a Cherry Bug on top. Formulazilla, so probably the opponent has to play a card now. First of all, they will gain some lives. So sadly, with them being on 5 life, it will be a bit difficult to maybe apply some pressure. And there's actually an attack with the Pepper Wing. And I think here's a relatively clear, it's a relatively clear answer to the question, what should be sacrificed here. I think I wouldn't sacrifice any of the hand cards. All of them have quite some potential, and that would be quite bad. And I do think the creature that can be should be defeated is the Spinakia, because it doesn't do that much in the board right now. Plus, it gives you some nice options for the broccoli bards, because you then have the option to get it back, maybe get the oyster with some new counters at some point, and also importantly, in case the life situation gets dangerous with the Duradillo, there's even the option to get the Duradillo back on hand, and maybe that could also be relevant. So
yeah.
I think that should be relatively clear.
What I did here.
And then, of course, the Pepper Wing can get blocked from the Formulazilla that is still on board.
Yeah. And there's the question to just block it with the Cherry Bug, but I think it's better to keep it.
Yeah. And now the oyster triggers, you can take control of a creature. I do think it's relatively clear what to take.
Yeah. For me, it's also clear. Just take the 8 Frenzy, because that's the creature that can do a lot of pressure now.
Yeah, especially with now a lot of 8 powers actually being gone, and the Pepper Wing is also already down to...
They also don't want to give my opponent all the time in the world, because he's still on 5 life. So if I don't have any Frenzy that can pressure him, it will take a very long time to kill him. So he has a lot of time to develop his board.
Yeah. So now it's your turn, and the Fearberry is about to trigger, which would be a bit annoying together with the Pepper Wing. So the question is, should the Fearberry now be taken out? Or is there maybe an option to apply some pressure yourself? You have an 8 power Frenzy, the opponent can't block it, but maybe it is not really quick enough, and it's an option to consider. But You attack 2 times, the opponent lets through 2 times, they own 3 life. They then get 1 Pepper Wing activation with the fear, combined with the Fear Berry. Then you can attack again potentially 2 times with the Crocodile, but then the opponent can either start blocking or just go down to 1 life. So it would be a bit threatening, but a Fear Berry would still be on board, and you would be on 1 life, meaning you can't sacrifice the Dirudillo any longer to remove the Fear Berry. So I think that it's safer to remove the Fear Berry now that you know that you still can use the Dirudillo.
I could still use the Dirudillo to kill it, because I have the Broccoli Buds, which can give me the Spinacia, which can replay the Dirudillo. But I think you're absolutely right. It's a little bit too risky. I was considering attacking with the captain, but I decided against it because it's just my opponent still has 7 cards in hand, and he can just take the damage now and probably save himself from an 8 power frenzy. There are still a lot of answers in his deck, probably.
Yeah. So I think at this point in the game, your board looks quite good. That is looking nicely. But you are down to 1 life. The opponent has still 7 cards in hand. At least you still have 1 Mindbug. But because of the 7 cards, I do think it's still a little bit threatening with being on 1 life, but at least your board looks relatively good at this point. Then we have the Prime Fungus displayed here, who will get the Hunter effect, but not to forget the Pomelozilla is still on board, meaning that the Hunter effect isn't that relevant. It's a poisonous creature, but just for that, it's definitely not worth it to use the last Mindbug here.
I have the same opinion. Just let it get through, and now we can think about maybe playing the Red Radish to just get rid of it, so that our captain can apply pressure again. And we have 2 ways of applying pressure now. There's of course also other options what we could do here. We could also consider just playing the Mango Knight now. Now we would have the opportunity to do it, because we can't hunt it away, thanks to our Pomelozilla. But he still has 6 cards in hand. I want to be a little bit more greedy with the Mango Knight here.
Yeah. And if you play it now, there's a chance that maybe a Pepper Wing the opponent attacks again with the Pepper Wing, removing that creature, and maybe the Prime Fungus can't attack, but the opponent can play around it a little bit more. Maybe it is nice to let the opponent commit to some cards first and then play the Mango Knight.
Yeah.
So I think it's nice to get a Red Radish here, remove the Fungus, and then applying pressure on 2 different ways, as you already said. And I think attacking here is not really that nice. I don't think you want to trade anything with the Prime Fungus here. The Cherry Bug, I think, is too strong to still let it trade with one of those creatures. So we play the Red Radish now. Prime Fungus is gone, and the opponent has to find some answers now, which is always a nice situation to be in. And there is a quite threatening answer, not necessarily an answer, or it's also an answer to the Captain Crocodile, but not to the sneaky creature. But this Kiving Chooser is extremely dangerous, because if you remember, the Lychee King is in the discard pile of the opponent, and if the life loss effect of that triggers, of course, that would be completely game over. So when I saw that situation, when we took a look at the replay, I immediately thought, okay, that has to be Mindbug, but there are actually some ways to maybe play around it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we of course don't have a 7 power in our graveyard, so it's like Weidenbaum said, it's really ugly for us to Mindbug it here. And we do have one answer still if he gets back his Lychee King, because we do have the Broccoli Buds, which can theoretically get back our Duradillo, which could take out the Lychee King. But it can do even more, actually, because we also have the Spinacia in graveyard, so we could play the Broccoli Buds, get back the Spinacia to replay our Broccoli Buds, and then play our Duradillo and take out the Lychee King, which of course is still quite dangerous, because we have a Duradillo with only 1 life left, and the Duradillo is also has only 1 life left. So it is quite dangerous, definitely, but I think it's a quite nice answer still, and we do have to take some risks at this point.
Now, I do think we had a little bit of a different opinion here because there's even another option on how to deal with the situation when this card is not mind-packed, and that is to again play the Broccoli Bards, get back Spinakia, and then play Captain Crocodile again, so that at the next beginning of your next turn you would gain 2 life, and with that the life loss of the Lychee King would also not be resulting in immediate danger. I think I prefer this option because it's a close one, I think. But I think I would like to avoid the situation with being on 1 life with an Duradillo on the board that is already 1 time defeated. You have the Pomelutzilla on board. I do think that removes the threat of that quite, or lowers the threat of that quite a bit, because a lot of creatures that maybe could kill the Duradillo are some hunters, but those can't attack at the moment. But there are still some defeated effects. Maybe you have to be more careful with your Mindbugs on some other potentially strong cards. And I think your board is still relatively strong with a sneaky creature, cherry bugs, a poisonous creature, Pomelutzilla. So I think I would prefer here to get Captain Crocodile back, and with that not being able to remove the Lychee King immediately, but being on more life and not having this ticking time bomb with the Duradillo.
That's of course absolutely true. I think it's quite close because on the one hand, the Captain Crocodile is not that risky than the play that I did. But on the other hand, the Broccoli Buds also give me back another creature on the board. I have basically 1 more creature on the board now if I do the way I did it. And like Weidenbaum said, some cards in his hand may be trapped because of the Pomelutzilla and he can't really use them. And I also have 1 Mindbug left. So there's actually not that many cards in his hand that he probably can use in this situation. But yeah, let's see. I definitely see your point, Weidenbaum. So maybe that would have been the better play.
Yeah, first of all, we can see some awesome stuff here. Playing the Broccoli Bards, getting Spinakia back from graveyard, to then get Broccoli Bards back in hand, and to then get the Duradillo to get an additional poisonous creature back. So I think some awesome stuff that you can do in combination with those 2 creatures.
Yeah.
So definitely a very fun option that you chose, and also a very legit option.
We're playing for the fun.
So now the Duradillo is on board and can probably should take out the Lychee King immediately. I don't think you should wait with that.
Yeah.
So now you have that threat removed immediately, and you still have 1 Mindbug left. I think without the Mindbug left, the other play should definitely be better. But
sure.
with the Mindbug left, you can answer some of the ways on how to defeat the Duradillo. And without hunters of the opponent being able to attack, there's definitely some hope that maybe this Duradillo play won't get punished.
And something like you might think of the dragon fruit that could also be a counter, but actually it is not, because I still have the cherry bugs. So there's 1 more counter that's not available for my opponent at this point.
No.
It's quite unusual to have such a big board in this rotation, I think.
Yeah. So quite a lot of creatures to take into account. And now there is a card that is maybe not an immediate counter on the Duradillo situation, but still an extremely threatening one, the Spore Weaver. You don't have a way to remove it quickly. The Duradillo, of course, can't attack, otherwise you are dead. And with that, getting 2 cards back out of the graveyard, especially also with the Lychee King being back in the graveyard and maybe being potentially brought back, I think is maybe too dangerous. Of course, you still have the Mindbug left if you don't use it, but I think it's an extremely threatening situation with the Spore Weaver.
Yeah, I think it's a must Mindbug here, basically, because I can't really get rid of the Lychee King fast enough.
No, the only way is to, if it goes back to hand, you have to Mindbug it, meaning the opponent basically plays without you having a Mindbug. So no.
Yeah, but I think that's too risky.
Yeah, so you can just, instead of playing without a Mindbug with knowing that the Lich King is in hand, you can also just use the Mindbug now, play without a Mindbug, but have a Spore Weaver for yourself that maybe can get you some draws. So I think it's definitely a Mindbug situation.
Yeah. Now you will see in the next turns I will have a lot of time pressure because I took quite some while for some decisions to finally decide. So
it's also a difficult board, lots of creatures, lots of play effects with interacting with the graveyard. So here you Mindbug it, 21 seconds left.
You might see some more mistakes from my side because of that.
Yeah. Now, of course, your last Mindbug is gone, and now we can maybe see a little bit the danger, of course, of the Duradillo play, because now there's a card play that will be quite threatening.
This is the point where I think I lose the game. There's no chance I can win anymore. I'm thinking about it, of course, but I don't have a lot of hope left.
No, so the Banana Puss is played, of course. It can't attack because of the Pomelozilla, but what it can do is activate the Harvest effect, and with that remove the Duradillo and with that defeat you. So that is now a very threatening situation, and you have no way to deal with it. If your opponent plays correctly, however, there's maybe one thing that can relatively easily be overlooked. There's maybe some hope for the game still being saved if the opponent maybe makes a mistake here.
I, in this situation, actually didn't even think about that because for me it was just over at that point. But you will see my opponent also, he's not thinking about it, and yeah, you will see what happens.
Yeah, you will see what happens, and here, of course, we also have to decide what to do. In retrospect, the Mango Knight could be played because the thing that will happen will have involve a creature of the opponent attacking, and the Mango Knight could maybe make it a little bit more likely that the opponent won't just play a card and maybe decides to attack. Just because of that, it might be the better play here, because if no misplay is happening here, then the game is just lost.
There's not a lot of time to think, and so I just say, okay, I attack with Red Radish, I can't win anyways.
Yeah, and we can see you here on 2 seconds, so you are playing on the edge here.
1 second.
So, yeah, I definitely had some nerves here.
I had to think for that long because I didn't see an answer for the situation.
No.
So even if the timeout was happening, it's just okay.
No, and here the opponent does actually decide to attack with the Pepper Wing, and maybe you can also pause the video here for a moment and think about yourself what could actually be a way to save the situation here. And yeah, the thing is that with the Pepper Wing attacking, there is the option to get one creature back to the graveyard. And if you maybe also remember the Spore Weaver that you just Mindbugged the turn before, it will trigger at the beginning of the turn, meaning a creature from your board that gets destroyed now can be played if it is taken back to the hand with the Spore Weaver at the beginning of your next turn. And there is one card that will help you extremely in the situation, and that is the Spinakia, who can get the Duradillo back on the hand, meaning that the danger of the Duradillo dying and you dying because of it is then removed.
Yeah, so I was very happy when I saw my opponent attacking with the Pepper Wing.
Now, I actually noticed just at the moment, maybe there was even another way to save it. I do think the Spinakia is probably the better way, but there could also be the play of sacrificing the Red Radish and then just eliminating the Banana Puss.
Yeah, that's definitely also.
That's something I didn't see. So
I also didn't see it because I just saw the one answer and was just oh my god, I can still win this.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think it's also the better way actually with the with the Spinacia here and the Duradillo, because the Duradillo just gives me more flexibility and more odds for the late game.
Yeah, because and as long as it stays in board, it's still, if the opponent somehow finds another answer to remove it, the game is still lost. But as soon as it is back in your hand, you can't lose, at least because of that. So, and you have it in hand as a hunter that can attack again, has a life point left. So I do think that's the better way. However, removing the banana.
And here I don't have a lot of time, so I just take the Lychee King, which maybe was still the correct pick because it does a lot of pressure. Because I have 2 frenzy creatures, so only one can get killed with the poisonous. And of course, the Keyring Juicer could be the second copy in his hand. And if he has the second copy, it's also, of course, quite bad for me.
Yeah, there could also be the Okra Shaman, for example.
I think it might have been still the correct pick to take it in hand, even though I was just under time pressure and picked it as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think your board is still very strong, still dangerous that you're on 1 life, but you have the Duradillo back in hand, so definitely some nice things going on for you, and here maybe just removing some outs for the opponent with maybe a second Piping Juice or an Ultra Shaman. Be quite important. So here you just take the Duradillo back in hand, removing the threat of it being destroyed and you losing the game on the spot. Then the Banana Puss is still triggering, and let's see what the opponent will decide to destroy. And it destroys the Pomelozilla, allowing the Banana Puss to attack, which I think makes sense.
Which is not as scary as I thought of first, because everything on my board basically has more power than the Banana Puss, or is poisonous, or is the Cherry Bug, except of the Red Radish. So now he doesn't really have any targets to hand anymore.
No, can only trade, but you have that many poisonous creatures, a trade would be completely disastrous.
Yeah.
So the danger of the sneaky creature is now gone, so maybe the opponent had to deal with it, but now, apart from that, the Banana Puss.
It's quite a crazy thought, I think. If you have such a big board that the hunter of the enemy still is no pressure at all for you, I think it's quite rare.
Yeah. The one thing, of course, that it does is that for the moment it prevents you from playing the Mangonade, so you have to hold that card at least back for now.
For sure, but I have all the tempo at the moment, so that's not that bad for me.
Yeah. So now it's your turn, and you can just attack. You could attack with the Crocodile, but that could then get raided with the Kiving Chooser, which maybe has to happen at some point anyway. But if you attack, maybe it could also be fine to just attack with one of the poisonous creatures, because those trades would be less bad for you. I think maybe the best would be to play the Lychee King here, getting a second 8 Frenzy on board, and also the life loss, just applying some pressure. Even after a trade with the Kiving Juice, you already have a second 8 power Frenzy on board and can maybe continue applying quite some pressure.
So I also played the Lychee King here, but I think it's just way better than attacking with anything else, because I have the tempo, so the 1 life loss will happen anyways, so it's like you attacked with a creature and you played an 8 power Frenzy.
No. So now you have still this very big board. The opponent has still 3 cards left in hand, and maybe because of your low life, the situation is still quite dangerous. There could be sneaky creatures, but you still have the Duradillo in your hand. To at least remove one of those. There is now quite a strong Hunter Blade, but again, with the Banana Puss, your whole board is either poisonous or 8 power, so this Ice Cube Dragon normally is completely threatening to see when you have a big board and that is played. Or no, it can remove like 4 of my creatures in the time that is on board, but in this situation it can basically only raid with 1 creature.
Yeah.
So again, you have to make a decision on what should attack here. And either you attack with maybe the Captain Crocodiles to maybe force the opponent to already do a trade with either Kiving Juice or maybe the Ice Cube Dragon, or you take it a little bit slower, attack with one of the poisonous creatures, or maybe the Cherry Bug, but I think I definitely would keep that around at the moment. And then you maybe don't force the opponent to block that quickly, but maybe can get a better trade going. I think I would maybe go with the poisonous attack, but I think both could be
I think it's very close. and I think I attacked with the captain here, but I probably should have attacked with a poisonous creature. Just I have so many of them, and the 8 power frenzies can be better in the late game than the poisonous.
Yeah, so let's see what you will do
But
here.
it's not that bad of a mistake because
No.
it's quite close.
No. So the opponent has now the option to trade with the Kiving Chooser. Can then maybe also trade with the Lychee King. That's of course one nice thing that the Ice Cube Dragon can do, maybe preventing the life loss potentially. I think that's also what the opponent will do indeed. And now it is your turn again, and you have now a lot of poisonous creatures. You don't want to play the Mangonate against the Banana Puss, you don't want to play the Duradillo, so you want to attack. And I think the Cherry Bug is also something that you want to keep, so basically you have a lot of poisonous creatures to choose from. And I think you just go with the lowest power poisonous creature here to maybe have a potentially bigger creature back on board, left on board, but maybe it could have been more viable here to look at what maybe the opponent, for example, something like Okra Shaman could actually get back
Yeah, but
their own
with
board.
the shaman, he probably would take the Lychee King anyways.
No.
And also, you can still consider him, my opponent, having dragon fruit, and so it's better if I get the 3 power, which where I have 2 of now, to get a trade with that. Because if he gets rid of my cherry bug somehow first and then plays a dragon fruit, maybe there's still some value he can gain.
No.
And I think our camera is frozen.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, I think that's a good point, taking the dragon fruit into account. One thing, I still think the Spore Weaver could be an interesting target for the Okra Shaman because while the opponent could get a Lychee King back, you also still have the Duradillo in hand as a counter, at least at the moment. As long as the Banana Puss is on board, you can't really play it. So maybe there is at some point a world where it's just better to get 2 cards with the Spore Weaver, but I think maybe does make that big of a difference, and there could be different cards who could maybe punish or reward attacking with the 3 or the 5 power. The opponent does indeed trade, interestingly.
Which makes our Duradillo now very powerful.
Yeah,
again.
yeah. So I think maybe it could have been idea to keep the Banana Puss on board a little bit longer, but at this point it's depending on the opponent cards also potentially looking quite threatening.
So now with him attacking with the Pepperwing, it's of course very nice to block with the Cherry Bug here and just take the Pepperwing because our opponent only has 1 card left in hand, and the Pepperwing can punish that really well.
Yeah.
And I can just discard the Mangonate now because I do have the answer for the last card in his hand. I still have the Duradillo, which can deal 1 damage to it, and I still have the Pepperwing, which can deal 1 damage to it. So I think there's nothing that can help him now.
Yeah, I also can't think of anything. As long as the hunter was still on board, something like a sneaky creature could have been still dangerous, but at this point, I think I can't really think of any card that would solve the situation here. So you just take the Pepperwing with the Cherry Bug, and now the opponent can't play their last card in hand. Or actually, not. First, you can attack. Good, interesting thing to know about the Pepperwing is, of course, if you have no creatures on board, you can just skip the discard and then you must sacrifice a creature, but you don't have any, but you still can just avoid the effect completely. I have already experienced it that my opponent had no creature on board, but they just willingly discarded a card, not knowing that they had actually a choice here. So, interesting thing to know about current set.
Yeah. Something you should keep in mind.
So there's the Pineapple Paladin, but now you can just raid it, and then there's no creature left for the opponent, meaning at this point the game is actually won.
Yeah.
Right. So I think quite an interesting game to analyze with some interesting situations and also special moments, especially of course play where you played the Broccoli Bards, getting back Spinakia, getting Broccoli Bards back in hand, playing Broccoli Bards, getting back the Duradillo, and with that removing the Lychee King that just got brought back by the Kiving Chooser was definitely a nice moment in the game. So no, I think quite an interesting one to take a look at.
Yeah, definitely some misplays from my side and from the side of my opponent, where we all can learn something from, I think.
No. So I do think with the relatively low time during a game, it's just natural that some mistakes will sometimes happen. Because especially with the big board state at the end, and if your clock is ticking down to 20, 10 seconds, then very easy to miss something then.
But anyways, I think it was a very interesting game, very nice, and thank you to my opponent for this very, very good game.
Yeah, and
of course, thanks to all of you watching this video.
Yeah, thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments if you have any special thoughts about this game, if you maybe notice something that we missed in our analysis. And yeah, then
if you enjoyed the video, always consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribe if you really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. Then thanks for watching and see you next time.
Thank you. See you.
Goodbye.